Professor Peter Jonason, your style scientist, is back. I was thinking about how we can get more attention to my YouTube channel, and I thought maybe we should do something a little more controversial today. So let's talk about, not this wine, of course. Let's talk about this conflict that we see a lot. Should men pay for dates? Well, what's the answer to that question? What's my answer to that question? Is yes, but. Well, but what? Before we get into the but what, we need to understand that this conflict between men and women is not some aberration of modern society or aberration of capitalism or anything like that. We find conflicts cross species between males and females, and of course, men and women are males and females, right? Over reproductive timing, like when they're going to have sex first, the amount of investment required by one sex. Typically, in the case of mammals, it's the males investing most, as opposed to the females who invest in their bodies, right? So the males are investing externally, right? Like with nuptial gifts, for example, that might be given to a female to entice her to mate, as an example. And so there's this battle of the sexes. And this idea is a little bit overdone in the manosphere and the incel community and all these kinds of things, because the pickup artist community as well, they really like evolutionary psychology, and they can take it to its extreme to a fair degree. But if we can understand that these are naturally occurring processes, then we can maybe start to understand why we have such strong emotional reactions to when we feel like we're being, let's say, screwed over, right? Robbed, betrayed, taken advantage of, all these kinds of things. Because our emotional systems have evolved to act as alarm bells for the getting taken advantage of. And so it's not a rational process, but I think if we can talk a little bit about the process rationally, it might allow us to have a more informed conversation and a more tempered conversation around these issues, instead of getting really defensive, instead of hating one another. We can get into maybe even some strategies to alleviate these problems if we can start rationally, calmly, dispassionately looking at these things. So let's get into it, right? So what is it? Should men pay on a date? Again, my answer is yes, but. Well, but what? Well, what are the buts that you need to consider? And these are mostly directed towards women here, okay? Because it's typically men who are the ones who are paying for dates, right? Women's money doesn't fund dating typically. So it's typically works this way, but understanding some of these considerations, and I'm not saying men should, I'm not giving any sort of excuse for any of this, but we should be aware of these things, right? So yes, but by requiring a man to pay and saying, if you don't pay, then we're not going to go out on a date, then you're not going to get to know me, then we're not going to have a relationship, you are creating a transactional relationship. That is, you must do this for me to do this for you. Moreover, it's a transactional relationship related to, if not love, but also sex too. So you're saying that as a woman, you're saying my sex, having sex with me and going on a date with me costs money. But we know it's not the case in the other way around, right? Men don't typically cost women money for dating or for sex. This is why it's very easy for a woman to go out and find a man to have sex with, because the level of investment required for a man to say yes is extremely low. Now, I mean, of course, the average man, not every single man that you've ever met in your life. So you might ask yourself, do you like this narrative of a transactional relationship? I'm not saying whether you should like it or not, but take ownership of the fact that that's what's being created here, okay? Another one, which is totally on the flip side of this one, is that if you are requiring a man to pay, you are also engaging in a kind of traditional script of relationships, right? That is, the man pursues and the woman submits kind of relationship, a very quasi-patriarchal kind of way of thinking about relationships, right? And if you're a feminist, for example, you might not like this idea, right? If you understand that these things are in conflict, you might be like, no, I don't like the idea of following a traditional script. Therefore, yeah, I think we should go 50-50, like in, Northern European countries, for example, right? As opposed to what you find maybe in places like Serbia or Poland or Ukraine or something, right? So uh, um, if you feel yourself to be, let's call it a modern woman, right? A feminist, an egalitarian type of woman, then you might take pause and say, is this the right, is this message consistent with the rest of my, let's call it psychological priorities, my social priorities, that type of thing, right? Another one, and this is a little bit, pointy here, is that men don't, yes, but they should pay, but yes, but they don't owe you anything, right? So men don't owe women their investment, their time, any more than you do. And in particular, when it comes to early dating, first dates, let's say, you are both strangers. So just as an example, why would I go spend $200 to have dinner with a woman who I don't even know if I like? Okay. You say, oh, well, that's the price of admittance. Okay, well, we're back up to the transactional phase then, the price of admission. So men don't owe you anything any more than you owe men something. So a man does pay. Women don't owe men sex any more than a man owes a woman investment, right? In that case, some expensive dinner and, all this kind of, very fancy, fly to Dubai, Habibi, that kind of stuff, right? Another one that we must get to is, yes, of course, men should pay. But let's be honest. Men aren't paying just to be nice, right? Men are paying because they want something. And it doesn't mean they necessarily want to only have sex with you. They're not necessarily trying to use their money to manipulate you or gifts or whatever it is. But your father and brothers and your male friends might pay for you all the time. But they know you. Right? Back to this issue of strangers, right? So they know you, and so they might be more willing to do so. But the men you meet on dating apps in day-to-day life, right? They're not taking you out to dinner because they're just nice guys. Indeed, the nice guy who might do that is the one that women seem to be rather reluctant to actually date. Now, they might go on dates, they might engage in what are called foodie calls with these kinds of guys, but they don't really feel that passion for that guy because that niceness is a little bit of a deal breaker, a little bit of an ick when it's misplaced. Because a lot of this has to do with the issue of where men are placing their investment, right? And how much investment. And so men are very sensitive to this misplaced investment. And so men develop kind of resentment for too much investment that doesn't seem to be going anywhere. And women are using investment as a cue to say, is this guy for real or not? Because of the greater reproductive obligation females have to their offspring, right? This brings us back to this investment sex calibration problem from the battle of the sexes. Another matter to consider is, yes, men should pay, but there is a difference between dates and meetings, right? So paying for a date is not, I think, equivalent to paying for a meeting. So if I have to pay for your Uber, for example, just to meet you, like let's say we met on Tinder, right? If I have to pay for your Uber just to meet me, then that's not particularly reasonable in my opinion, because meets are meant to say, hey, look, do we want to have a date, right? But meetings, like, oh, let's just meet up. We don't know each other. Let's see if we're, maybe you're actually a 3 foot tall, 300-pound, man when I thought you were a woman. Right? Let's become real people. Now, this doesn't necessarily play out as much when you meet in person, right? Because you have that truth already there. You've met this person, but still, you might still want to feel someone out. And so maybe even in the very beginning, you're not having a date. Oh, let's just grab a coffee. Let's just grab a drink. And then it's low investment on time, low investment on money, and good, no problem, right? So a coffee is not a lot, right? But I don't want to call a coffee date. Indeed, some women won't even call a coffee date a date. So let's call a date, and a meeting, right? We're gonna have a coffee meeting, right? We're gonna meet up, have some coffee, have a wine, and that'll be that. And then if I want to have a date with you, then not only should the man ask, this is my opinion, of course, the man should ask, and the man should pay, right? I'm willing to engage in the script, but other people other people might not be willing to, and we have to deal with the fact that people might not be on the same page as us. Okay, moving on. Back to this issue of say feminism. Yeah, men should pay, but equal effort, right? So if I'm paying for the date, well, what am I getting in exchange? And I'm not saying sex, right? But if I'm paying for a date and you show up in a sweatsuit, or you show up very casually, or you rush off to be with the next guy, or this type of thing, well, then we're not really equally trying here, right? And so if you're dating around, then what obligation, what reason do I have to keep pouring effort and resources? So there should be some kind of reciprocal effort. Yeah. And women might say, oh, well, look, all the time it takes me to get ready, all the makeup. We didn't require any of that. Men don't need you to wear makeup. Men don't need really anything. I am a weird man in the sense that I want a woman who's dressed up. But most men, right, especially when it comes to something like just a casual, let's have some pizza kind of date, right? Let's just go, right? So equality of effort. So yes, men should pay, but be aware of the fact that there is this kind of equal investment, right? And so we're trying to figure out if I put in 5 units of effort and you put in 1 unit of effort, well, then you're not as interested in me, right? And we have an investment asymmetry. And this can build up not only to resentment in the man, but it can actually build up similarly to a kind of resentment in the women, that the guy is super investing, but I just don't, but like he doesn't give me the chance, or I don't really feel it as much, or this kind of thing. And so you want to have, especially in the beginning, equal levels of investment, and requiring a man to pay or is kind of it unbalances the equation. So find a way to rebalance the equation. Okay. Yes, a man should pay, but at least offer. Okay, at least offer, right? So okay, let's split that. And no, it's okay, right? Now, this is an opportunity that women have that they might not be aware of. This is an opportunity to show some integrity and pull the ripcord, right? And say, I don't want to see this guy again, right? So as my friend Maya says, you don't really want to have a date with someone who you don't even know and sit there for hours, having dinner with someone you can't stand after 15 minutes. Paying signifies to most men, this woman is probably not interested in me, right? Because it says the investment has quit here, right? That you're going dollar for dollar, so to speak, right? You're not like investing in an alternative way. So for example, with my ex-girlfriend, of course, I had more money. And so I would pay for dinner and that kind of stuff. And the investment that I would have liked in exchange was never money. There's other things that you can do, right? So, cook, or help me with something here in Poland, or these kinds of things, right? So we should not be counting money, right? This is a very bad way of dealing with anyone, friendships or lovers. But there needs to be this understanding that if I give this and then the next exchange you give this, right? This is a building of a relationship, as opposed to this back and forth, which is what you do with your friends more often, right? Because you're not trying to invest in the same way in your friends as you do in your potential lovers. Yes, men should pay, but who invites should really pay, right? So ladies, if you invite a guy out for dinner, or you invite a guy out for coffee or to the movies, and this has happened to me, it's not really cool to then expect him to pay, right? So whoever is the initiator should do the paying, right? And most of you women who are going to listen to this, you're making sufficient money to buy, I don't know, a movie ticket, for example. If you're not crazy wealthy, don't go to Nobu Sushi. Go to a pizza restaurant, right? It's not that complicated here, right? So I had this experience where a woman invited me to the movies and then stood there and waited for me to pay. And I was like, you invited me. All right. Well, in the end, of course, what happens? The man pays anyways, as in me, right? The default becomes I pay, right? Because we have to, let's be honest, dating is funded by men. And so women can kind of take advantage of this situation a little bit. And that's one of the things I want you to be aware of, is the potential to take advantage of it should make you more weary about your behavior when it comes to this situation, right? Don't parasitize the system, because what it ends up doing is it creates a kind of global resentment, right? And so a lot of this incel stuff has to do with the habitual abuse that lets some men perceive themselves experiencing, and then they externalize the blame, right? Then they get mad at the women for doing this kind of stuff. All right. So you might also, another reason men should pay is if you think there's going to be a second date, right? So if I'm on a date with a woman and I want to see her again, I'll pay, I'll be generous, great. And that's what I think is a good plan for the man. Yeah. But if he doesn't want to see you again, hey, I think we should split the bill. Now, for a lot of women, that's going to be a turnoff, and that will guarantee that the second date won't happen. But if the man has decided no more, and you ladies may have decided this as well, so it's a strategy, right? Splitting the bill is a strategy for saying, this is over, right? Yes, men should pay, but are we talking about in the beginning of a relationship for courtship purposes, or are we talking about later on in the maintenance time, right? When you've been together, you've been together 3 months, a year, whatever the number is in your mind to say that we are an established couple, now we are mutually investing in each other's future and well-being, feeding, right? Food and activities are part of our mutual well-being, right? Like I shouldn't have to pay for your plane ticket to come see me for my birthday, right? Mutual investment, right? Once you're an established couple. And so where you draw the line is really up to you here. And you have to negotiate that with your partner and based on your belief system. But if you're not aware that this is even part of the process, it might even cross your brain. So men should pay almost certainly more in the courtship phase. But when we're a couple, we are now a team. And if we're a team, well, then we're sort of pooling resources, aren't we? And so the money that I make, it's like it's our pooled money. Not all of my money is your money, and none of your money is my money, right? No, we're working together, especially if we're living together, right? And it doesn't mean still equal investment, right? So if I make 3 times what my girlfriend makes, well, then it's reasonable that I'm paying 3 times more of the expenses. But it's a mutual pool that we're drawing from. Okay? So all of that being said, what can we do about this? What are some strategies that we can use to make our relationship in terms of this issue more effective, less combative, less stressful? So let's give you some advice, okay? So we've gone through already some considerations you have to deal with when this idea of men should pay, right? We say, yeah, men should pay, but there's all kinds of considerations, and that's what we went through here. But this is a reality, right? And we have to deal with this. We're not just living in a theoretical universe. So first of all, be honest about your expectations around money, around who pays, not only with your partner, but with yourself. Look into yourself and say, why do I think that men should pay? Am I just going through the motions of some old script that I saw in the movies? Do I think this is a good thing to do? Is this the kind of woman I want to be? All right? A second bit of advice. Don't assume that you and your partner share the same scripts, the same intentions, and the same speeds. So I might be a person who's slower to deciding whether I want to go on a date with you. Maybe I'd like to get to know you a little bit. So if I'm interested in a long-term mindset for relationships, if I'm a long-term mating-oriented man, which for some of you listening would laugh at that, but I'm a big boy now. I've grown up. I want to know that we're compatible. And it's hard to know you're compatible very quickly. It takes quite a bit of time. And often it probably takes something like 2 or 3 months. Now, I'm not saying I would wait 2 or 3 months by any means, but I'm not ready to go on a date with someone who I've never met, for example. And I hope many of you feel the same way, right? And so that you're a stranger to me. I don't really want to go out on a date. I mean, dating is like leading somewhere, isn't it? Right? But okay, let's just feel this out. Like, do we have a good vibe? Like, do they give me the ick, right? Maybe it turns out that the person smells, right? For example, do you want to sit there across the table for an hour with someone who smells or has bad breath or has bad table manners, or maybe in terms of language, even, right? So maybe you can't even communicate because you thought you spoke the same language, but maybe one of you is using Google Translate, or who knows, right? Or maybe you have nothing in common, right? Maybe you're a nail technician and I'm a professor, and it's really hard to find common ground. So why pay for dinner in this case, right? Why have a date in this case? Another bit of advice is, of course, and I think this is important related to the last one, is start slow, right? So in game theory, we would say that to build trust, to build a relationship, you must engage in a tit for tat exchange in the beginning, right? And that is, if I bid in, you bid in. If I bid out, you bid out. That's it, right? We equal each other's investment. Again, not literally equal in terms of dollars, I don't think, but we equal each other's investment. And so if you have a nice time with me on our meeting, then maybe you engage and you up your conversation on text or something like that, right? And so where there's this mutual escalation. Over time, you move from tit for tat to a more delayed system. But tit for tat is the only way that we know of that strangers can build trust, right? So start slow and then increase effort. And the minute that person stops putting in effort or doesn't match your effort, this is called defecting, and then you should stop your effort, right? Last bit of advice: seek people in your relationship life, ideally, with similar cultural backgrounds and similar experiences in their dating lives, because they will come to the dating experience with similar attitudes and ideas. And this is one of the problems when you're dealing with cross-cultural relationships, when people are traveling the world. There's often this conflict that's created because of we don't share those expectations, we don't share those dating models, and we don't do a very good job at communicating them because we're rarely even aware that we have those things, and we take them for granted because this is the only way to be. So you will minimize the time wasted and the losers kissed if you simply can be more explicit in what you want and take your time, ideally choosing from people who are more similar to you than less similar to you. All right? So that's it for today. Please like, comment angrily or happily if you want. I'm hoping I can come up with some more other controversial topics that might get more clickbaity stuff going on. And so, yeah, that's it. Ciao.